Today is a great occasion for us. We've been looking forward to this for quite some time. Today is our first podcast on Architecture Deconstructed. Architecture Deconstructed is a movement that we've embarked upon recently. It's an opportunity to engage with CTOs, VPs, other technology leaders far and wide, and really start unpacking the topics that are near and dear to the hearts of architects, the hearts of decision makers in tech, that are unfettered, that are unscripted by vendor choices or by networking. They're really at the heart of the science of it all. What is happening in tech? How do we make better decisions? What do we accomplish? How do we accomplish it better? And so anyway, that's a little bit of the beginning to this. We're delighted to have an excellent agenda and some great guests on today. I'm Boris Bogatin, CEO and co-founder of Cat.io. I've been building tech companies for my career, and the topic of architecture and approaching it with science and rigor has been near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited about this opportunity today. Doof, I don't know if you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, excellent. Thanks, Boris. I'm Tufik Boubez. I'm a CTO and co-founder at Cat.io. I have been an architect and a CTO for just about 20 years in like 5 different startups. So obviously, this is, as Boris mentioned, a topic that's near and dear to my heart and very passionate about. And I'm really, really excited to have two amazing people to discuss this topic with on our first podcast. So let's go.
Let's go. It's time to deconstruct some architecture. Today, we're grateful to have two esteemed colleagues, Satish Raghunath and Emil Abrashimov. Maybe starting with Satish, if you can give us a couple of words of overview on yourself and your colored background, and then maybe just tell us a little bit more about kind of in a couple in a couple minutes, what's near and dear for you in 2025? What's been keeping you thinking and happening that's current and now for the audience?
Great. Thank you, Boris and Tawfiq. Sincere thanks for including me on this forum. Sounds like an exciting journey that you're all embarking on. A little bit about my background. I've been in various technology roles for 2.5 decades now. And right now, I had some of the key infrastructure engineering services at Salesforce. Salesforce is a global leader in AI and CRM. And in Salesforce, we have a platform called Hyperforce. And Hyperforce is the infrastructure
Yeah.
that makes it all tick, helps our customers adopt AI and do all of the things that they do around CRM. That's my day-to-day job. Very exciting, huge scales, a lot of really interesting problems
Can imagine.
that we solve at Salesforce. My own background before Salesforce, I've had my own startup called Twin Prime, which was a mobile CDN, which got acquired by Salesforce. So I've been in the infrastructure space for a while now. And you asked a very interesting question that, what's really been our focus and what we are focusing on from an architecture perspective. A lot is changing in the infrastructure space, especially in the public cloud arena. And one of the biggest topics that we are spending a lot of time on is availability. As you might guess, Salesforce is a mission critical service. Even a blip in terms of a downtime has an impact on day-to-day lives of people. People do finances, they do insurance, they do emergency services, they do a
Yeah.
lot of really critical things on top of Salesforce, the platform. The responsibility as the infrastructure engineering team that we have is to design and architect and build systems for scale, availability, and resilience. It can't be a bolt on. We have to think right from the point when somebody starts a design document, even before a line of code is written, and ask the questions of how do we make sure this is a highly available, resilient architecture. And within that space, one of the concepts that we care really deeply about is what we call the radius of impact. Some people also refer to it as blast radius. What that really means is that when you have a failure in your infrastructure, how does your architecture gracefully handle that failure? How much of your surface area is impacted by it? How many customers experience it? How do you measure it? How do you observe it? How do you recover from it? That's really a large activity for us. We've spent a lot of time and effort and dollars in
Yeah.
making our infrastructure truly, truly available. And that's a topic that's really close to our hearts this year.
Thank you,
Excellent.
Satish.
That's
Appreciate that.
really great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good points. Very good points. Yeah.
I can't wait to dig in some of that because
Yeah.
one thing that just really quickly for the audience, Satish mentioned briefly Twin Prime, and Twin Prime was a very innovative company when Satish and I met, and he was revolutionizing things that were happening on the CDN side by applying AI to an age-old topic of protocols and RFCs that really caught my attention. It was really interesting. But Emil, why don't we shift over to you, and would love to hear a little more about yourself.
Yeah, great to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Emil. I run engineering, product, and design at GEM. We are a Series C startup. We're building an all-in-one AI-first recruiting platform. And I guess to come to your question about what's top of mind for me nowadays, especially when it comes to building products and systems that we're building, definitely a lot of what Satish said resonates. What I would add to this is, we've always been in a fast moving field where things are changing a lot. That feels even more true now than ever. Not only are the technologies that we use changing and the new ones becoming available and so on, but also the way that we make decisions, the way that we think about, the way that we build products are changing so quickly. With AI in particular, I've had a realization recently that really kind of changed how I think about things. It used to be when a new thing comes out and you try it, you can draw some conclusions about, this works, this doesn't, you can use it this way, but not that way. And then based on these conclusions, you can go about what are you going to use and how are you going to do things. Nowadays, you try something, you try a coding copilot, you try any tool out there, and you draw some conclusions, and then 3 4 months later, if you do the same trial, you're going to learn new things. This thing
Yeah.
that didn't work suddenly now works,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Start
just
over again. Yeah.
yeah, it's a much faster iteration cycle. So that's definitely top of mind for me. How do we make sure the team can operate and we're not falling behind with all these things? And then the other thing when it comes to architecture is we need to be moving very quickly with our product. New things we're discovering, others are discovering, we're finding out from them, etc. New technologies are coming up. We need to be building things in a way such that we can move very quickly. We can modify them, extend them, change underlying models, change underlying whatever is being used. So this is very much top of mind for me.
That's great. Thank you. So when just on that last point, I imagine some kind of flexibility in the architecture, is a requirement so that you can replace this, replace that, change models, all that kind of stuff. How do you just we also are dealing with the same thing, I mean, we've picked an LLM at some point, and we picked a vector database at some point, and we picked a database at some point. And as you said, I look back at decisions we made 3 4 months ago, and I'm like, okay, we need to change this. So how do you deal with that kind of with those? I mean, this is open to both of you, obviously.
Emily, you want to take that first?
Sure, yeah. I mean, as I'm thinking through the answer here, I wonder if I'm missing something. But actually, my answer here would probably be not that novel. I think it's a lot of things
It
that
doesn't have to be.
we've kind of always, general principles that you always good and good practices of engineering. It's important to know to identify what is core and what isn't, and then that allows you to like focus on okay, let's make sure we think about the core stuff and make sure that's designed well and flexible, etc. And the stuff that isn't, or you're not sure, or experimenting, you can move quickly on that one, and not overthink it. And then let's identify the pieces that are going to change. Models. You mentioned models. That's very clearly an area that a lot of innovation is happening right now. They're changing super fast. If you don't have a good way of switching models very quickly, I mean, you should be able to tell within days of a new model coming up if it's making your product better or not. If you're not able to do that, I think you're gonna fall behind because there's now many
Interesting.
companies that are making them, and each of them is making many models. So, you kind of
Interesting.
have to
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At some point, yeah, the proliferation is interesting. Sorry, Satish, well, you were going to say something about that topic too.
Yeah, yeah. I think, you captured it very well, Emil, that, what is really core to you and your team, and how do you decide what is core? That's really a business question. And if you ask engineers, very often they'll find whatever is cool and shiny to be core to whatever we are doing.
Mistake number
That's,
one, asking
I think it's
Satish,
really
that's a
good
rookie
to.
mistake. Come on.
It's definitely good to get the engineer's perspective because you know what's out there, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know what your spectrum of options are. And what I usually weigh that with is one of the things that Emil mentioned, which is switching costs. The way I would put it is that if you especially have requirements around supporting a variety of environments, for example, let's say you want to support federal customers, you ought to be able to run in a government cloud or a sovereign cloud. Or let's say you want to be able to support multiple public cloud vendors. Your customers may have sensitivities around which public cloud you're hosted on. So depending on the stage of the company you are at, in addition to the switching costs, there are other considerations like what is my business really looking like right now? And then the other thing we try to do is we try not to build abstractions where possible. It's easy to fall into the trap of saying, I'm going to build this beautiful API around S, but guess
Yeah.
what? The whole world has already adopted S3 APIs, and you're just
So
introducing another hurdle, right?
why add another
Yeah,
point,
yeah.
potential point of failure? Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And the other aspect of abstraction is that you have to be very, very confident that you're not hobbling your teams from getting the most out of the platform that you're using right now, because your abstraction becomes the least common denominator, right? So for those reasons, you have to pick an abstraction. Typically, my rule of thumb is when it's a commodity, when it's a very, very well-known quantity, the abstraction APIs are something the community has known. Those are the things I would look to.
yeah,
So those are the considerations in whether you should build something or
yeah,
optimize for switching and
yeah.
substrate independence and so on.
In essence, except if there's a de facto standard, and just use it, right? And then
Just use it.
don't try to be too theoretical and idealistic about some of these things.
And if I was to synthesize this a little bit, I mean, it's interesting in the rapidly changing world of 2025. I mean, we truly live in one of a time kind of a time. You know, the adage of focusing and really, focusing your efforts into and building and innovating in areas of true core competencies. And similarly to what I think, Emil, you were mentioning,
Yeah,
focusing your ingenuity and investment and commitments and investments into areas that you feel like you have true signal and true insight that is there to stay, because you're going to be, at least you'll be shaping it directly, versus in areas where you don't have ability. I mean, I was taught that, there's only three things or something like that that you can really innovate in. Everything else you have to be very maniacally almost not innovating it and accepting the standard and being able to adopt and really work with it. I think what we're saying is in order to stay abreast of the changes, the important thing is not to create hurdles, to be able to be agile, to not create investments, abstractions, other
yeah,
buildup on top of things that are going to be ephemeral. They're going to be changing very quickly. And so the best thing you can do in those areas is to, kind of stay abreast of it, be able to adapt it quickly,
yeah.
prototype and experiment through it, as like Emily mentioned as far as LLMs, and be able to be flexible to change out and to keep evolving using best practice for that specific time frame. Did I get that right? Is that
Yeah, great synthesis.
So now, Boris, I'm curious, what are the three things that we can innovate on, and where do we rate? Where do we rate on those three things? You should have told me that. Like now, you tell me.
Tuvik is
well,
now
I
going to
mean,
edit his backlog.
I know.
Now,
now you can get into deeper topics because we're talking about architecture deconstructed, but the three things that probably start going into air, probably food. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if
yeah,
there's
don't.
some food deconstruction to talk about, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah. No,
we
that's
have a friend that will hopefully appear on a future podcast. That's a big foodie as well, and he's a big architect and technologist. And the
yeah.
moment he heard about architecture deconstructed, he's like, "We got to talk about
Food,
food, guys. I mean, come on."
deconstruction. Yeah,
But coming back, so that's interesting and very kind of topical to another topic that I want to bring up. Coding copilots in our world. I mean, AI is is this thing that it started in 2023, right? Right, Chief?
that's right. Exactly.
I know you got your PhD in something you think was AI, but I know
Yeah, it
that's not
was. Yeah, it
that's
was
not
just math.
really.
It was called math in those days.
Yeah. But coding copilots are a buzz, and a lot of software developers, of course, are using it in a very kind of productive way. I'm guessing, in the context of what we're talking about, as much as it's universally applicable, probably especially applicable to things that are ephemeral and you want to stay on top of, you want to use best practice versus things that you have specific insight in, and maybe you have something even. I mean, even there you can reuse fundamentals, but I'm
Yeah,
sure you may have some more specifics. But in the context of architecture, if we think about it kind of from perspective of tech leadership and use of I know Satish with Twin Prime, you were, on top of the, innovation wave of thinking, how do we apply AI to create dynamic protocols and make kind of do away with statically defined protocols, which was really neat. But as far as using AI and what we're doing today, what you're doing with availability and everything you're dealing with Hyperforce and what you're doing with Emil rapidly building features in the space of AI and recruiting, I know a space that's also very affected by AI.
Yeah.
Maybe you guys can touch upon some of that. Maybe just to change it up a little bit. Emil, you want to go first?
Sure. Let's see. So coding pilots and everything that's going on. I mean, coming back to what I said earlier, I think a big part of this is it's changing a lot. There used to be people would say, okay, we should make sure everybody's using AI. That was like the big push I kept hearing from various people. CEOs would send out emails to everybody like you should try AI first before
The CEOs.
before whatever. And
If you're not using AI, you ain't.
yes, if you're not using AI, you're in trouble, that sort of thing. The thing is, it's not using AI is not binary.
Correct.
Coming back to my earlier point about how quickly things are
Yeah.
changing, you could start using AI, and then if you keep using it the same way, 3 months down the road, you're behind again. So that's the biggest thing, with coding copilots. I mean, my wife is a staff engineer; she codes a lot more than I do. But what I've observed with her is over the last 6 months, I think she switched maybe 4 times. She went from Copilot to Cursor, and I think she's back at Cursor now. And every time she does the switch, she tries them, and the thing that she switches to is better than the thing that she switches from, and it's just they change, and they're definitely adding a lot of value. People are using them also in ways that are outside of the direct way in which they were designed to be used. I've actually heard from engineers who have, for example, they start their initial draft of a design doc in a coding copilot, and that actually saves them a bunch of time, things like that. And I think one of the big pieces of value that I'm hoping we can see more and more from these products, and actually a lot of AI products out there, is if things are changing so quickly, it would be a pity if every person has to try every model for everything they do every day.
Yes.
So I think that's the value that these tools can bring. Like if you're building a AI copilot for coding, or if you're building, a product for architecture, or if you're building whatever you're building, a recruiting tool we're building, I think the value that we want to be delivering to customers is they should trust us that we are keeping the product at the top. We're trying all the models, we're trying all the new methods, we're keeping up, so that recruiters don't have to every day check every new model for the thing that they're using and so on. So that's where I see a lot of value that sort of application layer AI companies can bring to them.
That's so true. And there's definitely an arms race out there right now between all the various AI providers. You're right. I mean, it's hard to keep up.
Let's go.
Great points. Yeah.
Well, and maybe just for one more minute, Emil, as far as your own day-to-day in engineering leadership and kind of the decision-making aspect of it, do you find that that's also being affected by AI? I know you mentioned engineers doing design reviews or starting to write some initial designs and fun specs. But how
You're
about
asking
yourself?
for me personal as a my role? Yeah, I mean 100%. So I've definitely used just the chatbots, the ChatGPT. I've tried, Gemini a bunch, and again, I've had to change from one to the other as they get better. It's just very, I used to, when I have a question about something, I think about something, I would go to my Slack group with other friends in similar roles to mine, and I would be like, hey, what do you do for this? How do you do that? And now I feel like I first go to the AI, do an initial research. If I need to, then I can go to the network. But if anything, sometimes it knows even more, because the model, so much of knowledge in it. So that's very useful. I don't produce code, but coding copilots are actually useful for browsing code as well. So if I want to quickly understand something, tools like Glean and whatnot are super valuable. I mean, depending on how your company is organized, this may vary. But for example, we have so much information in Slack. All of these conversations are happening in a gajillion channels. And so if I have a question about like why is something built the way it is, we used to do it with just Slack search, but it was kind of like a very special skill you would develop over time. How do you find like what you need in Slack?
Yeah.
But now with like AI, you can do that a lot better.
You have to be a query wizard.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's
Well,
a weird
well,
level
yeah.
for me too.
So actually, to that point, we will get back to Satish, but on that point specifically, something that I've been kind of not just myself, but a lot of people, but including me, been concerned about a little bit is that I mean, Stack Trace and all those publications that are out there that were I used to go this and check. Now, like you're saying, you go to the chat GPT or whatever, you ask a question, you get much better results because they have read every stack trace answer out there that you don't have to go to anymore or slash dot whatever, right? But the danger here is that nobody's contributing anymore new questions and new problems and new solutions to problems. And then so at some point, where's that? Who's going to give us the answers to the new problems? And that's kind of something that I always worry like about from that kind of perspective, right? So I don't know. So yeah,
Interesting. Yeah,
Somebody
yeah.
was trying to track how much of the content on the internet is being generated by AI. Because now you have like,
oh yeah,
news publications will generate content on AI, publish it on the internet.
all the time.
And then the new models are like training on that. So it's
Oh
going to be a
yeah,
bit of a, there's going to be
it's
an
called
interesting.
Garbage
yeah.
in, garbage out.
Well, they're
Yes.
calling it's model collapse, right? At some point,
Right.
that's what the name for that
Yeah.
particular thing is, model collapse. Anyway,
Right.
sorry, Satish, I didn't mean to
No,
kind
no,
of bring you,
but that's good
yeah,
discussion.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Not you
think,
jumping. Yeah.
because I do have a
just on
question
that
for you
last
also after this, Satish, on
Yeah,
the
the
blast
last bit
radius.
that you mentioned, where will the new data come from? I think one other thing that is happening is that new data is getting siloed. It's not on the internet as much. Whereas you would have even a couple of years back, now it's actually in your Slack, it's in your internal documents because it's much easier to discover those. In Salesforce, of course, we Slack is our product. So we'll probably want to help you with this, but we use Slack AI extensively for
Yeah,
search. The way I interact with Slack has changed completely. I don't go to channels anymore. I just ask Slack AI, what is this? Where is this document? Even URLs for documents, I don't even search anymore. I don't go to the
yeah,
browser. I just ask Slack because somebody has already shared it in Slack. And the other thing that we do a lot in terms of using Gemini and Notebook LM. We tend to put all of our design documents and architecture documents into a common area which Notebook LM can consume,
oh,
and then you can just ask things of it or even, have it build narratives for you, which
yeah,
has been very, very effective. And of course, the coding copilots, like Emil mentioned as well, have been truly something that has caught the notice of almost all engineers, I'd say. It definitely has led to a productivity boost. Personally, as an infrastructure engineering leader, what I'm bracing for is the first AI sourced outage. I'm still waiting for that massive outage where one of my team members will say, I didn't write that code, it was the AI.
oof,
So I think
yeah,
that's until that happens, and then we learn from that on where the boundaries are. Right now
yeah,
we are in this really the peak of the curve where it's all like, yeah, it's great, it's fantastic, and especially for greenfield kind of coding that I tend to do usually. Like I need a tool. I don't ask my team anymore. I just ask
yeah,
my coding copilot and I rarely even edit it. The tool just works out of the box. So those kind
yeah,
of things are good. But then when it comes to editing really complicated code bases with millions of lines of code, developers are
mm,
treading with a lot of caution. It does help, but it's not yet at a point where you could trust mission critical systems to it.
yeah,
So I think, on balance, I haven't heard anybody say, wow, this doesn't change the way I do work. Everybody is asking the question, like, how do I look at the next year or next 6 months on how do I approach work? I mean, that itself is changing.
But it's
yeah,
interesting, what I would say, kind of just hearing the discussion, and I may kind of try to synthesize this in a way that hopefully doesn't project too much. Where we have coding copilots as an example, where it's AI very specifically tuned and oriented toward code and to writing code, to reviewing code, et cetera, on code. I heard three use cases mentioned as far as AI. I heard one that starting to be able to reuse that same coding copilot for design reviews and func spec kind of writing. I heard, the historic kind of notion of chatting with your colleagues of the community to understand what tools to use or what DBs to deploy or how to look at certain patterns. Today, you're querying the AI to bring that
Yeah,
because it's already
yeah,
gone through that. It's bringing that. So it's kind of like your community at your fingertip, essentially now, as opposed to having to make 5 calls. And then the
yeah,
third thing that I heard, Satish, kind of the next version of that, which is not only that, but also it's reading all the internal stuff. So now all the internal docs, you're able to kind of synthesize them and kind of shape into how do you do something more with off of that? Kind of how do you leverage that and do more? But from all the three things that I mentioned, is that one, that there's a lot of value that you're getting, and it's kind of gotten in the context of similar to how ChatGPT is providing value for general use cases today, where it's got this general intelligence, is able to apply it in a way that does direct to your specific things, but there isn't yet a platform that pulls us together the way coding copilots do for these types of things. There's no
yeah,
platform that says, or at least not platform that you guys are, kind of actively using yet that's made available that says, here are the best services for your specific question. Here's the right design for your specific design imperative.
yeah.
Here's how I leverage on a stack of foundation patterns to advance into this direction based on everything I see in organizationally and all the guidelines that have been put in place already historically that I want to build on. Is
Hmm.
that fair?
I think, Emil said something earlier which really resonated with me and kind of agrees with what you're saying, which is that, there are all these LLMs out there. You as an end user, you don't want to go to each of these LLMs and then figure out, does this work for me for coding? Oh, does this work for me for architecture? That's not the best use of my time. Now everybody knows that, it's sort of like Linux is fantastic. Yeah, we know Linux is fantastic. It's similarly like, LLMs are great, but I need to do architecture. Am I going to go to each LLM and go figure out, oh, does this know enough about architecture? I don't know what it's been trained on. Whereas if I go to Cat.io, I'm thinking about like, you have your guardrails, you've vetted what it gone into it, and it's giving you sane information. I think that's really, really interesting perspective.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, I just do want to get back to something that stuck in my mind a little bit from you said earlier, Satish. Actually, two things. One of them is like on Notebook LM. You guys use it, and I mean, have you used Notion or some comparative? I've been meaning to use it. I have it, and I've played with it a little bit, but I mean, are you finding it? Is it a game changer? And then I have a question about the blast radius thing that you mentioned, but go ahead.
Yeah. I think in
I
general,
don't know what you're also if you're using Notion or any of these, but anyway, go ahead.
yeah, I would say in general for information discovery, the
Mm.
LLMs have been game changers. I would go for so far as saying that not only information in documents, information in data stores has also become accessible. With the MCPs coming into the
Oh
picture,
yeah,
I'm able to ask questions of our infrastructure, which is just mind blowing. So I think this has changed the accessibility of this information quite a bit, and things like Notebook LM, which are so tailor made for the user's experience. I think those things really shine because you can throw information at it and then you can reason with the information. That's really powerful, especially if you're a mature team with you'll have hundreds of documents which are each really dense.
that's right.
That's where
Yeah.
they really, really shine.
And Emil, what's your experience using these kind of like text-based, like Notion or Notebook LM or something like that? How do you guys use?
Yeah, we have a democratic model of tools at GEM. So we use a lot
I
of
see.
tools. I think
Yeah,
any single tool that you name
that's
probably
actually
we do.
interesting. How do you find that? Is that what are the pluses and minuses of that?
That's a great question. I think one of the pluses is that it does help us stay a little bit more on top of what is you let it's faster for the best tool to find its way into the tech stack
Yeah.
because people experiment with new tools all the time and then bring them in and then everybody else sees very
It's
quickly.
like natural evolution, but for that you run it inside your company.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's a little bit of that going on. I do think there's like some downside. Obviously, you get like a little bit of a proliferation of tools, and then in some places that doesn't, in your doc system, you don't want to have 50 tools. It's just messy to find stuff and
yeah, 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 yeah,
so
yeah.
on.
Yeah, without
The
like a
other
common data platform between them all, you start
Yeah.
running into data silos.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is this is a recent realization I had. Some of these tools, they you could just start using them on off, but you could also, if you get like a full deployment at your company, you could like do additional setup. You could have it index, more of your code. You could have it like whatever you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that only happens when you have this like centralized force. Like, hey, we're gonna deploy cursor or whatever, but we're gonna like do this additional setup, give it extra
Yeah.
access to things, give it extra context. Somebody's
Yeah.
gonna go
Yeah.
spend time to configure it and give it extra context and all that stuff. Which if you're doing one off, everybody brings their own tool. Usually you
Exactly.
have this.
So
That's an interesting.
this is a perfect example because I used to be also a use whatever IDE you want. Like it doesn't matter, right? As a developer. But now, exactly. So now several people on my team are using Cursor, and I'm like, should we consolidate? And then is there a way to leverage Cursor if we're all using Cursor? How can we leverage to the next level? I mean, I'd be curious to hear your view on that or your experience on that.
I mean, my take ultimately is there is a benefit to that, but again, you're trading off against moving quickly.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
if the best solution changes 4 times over 6 months, maybe it's not worth to spend 3 months setting it up properly
yeah.
until you see some stability. Then once it's like more stabilized,
True.
you set it up. It's a trade-off. You kind of that's
Yeah,
where
yeah, I know,
the
I know.
art is.
It's a hard one. I've
Yeah.
oscillated back and forth on like just pick all of you guys, pick one tool and let's go with it, you know? And if you don't like it, suck it up, versus.
I mean, the
Anyway,
problem is the differences are big. I mean, from our experience, we recently got a Gemini turned on for everyone. I wasn't
okay. Yeah,
using Gemini until then. I was like, oh, we turned it on for, I'm gonna try this. In my experience, it was significantly worse
thing.
for what I was just getting significantly worse answers and significantly less value. And so I knew that because I was using another tool. And it's great that I don't have to use Gemini at work. I can
Yeah,
continue using, ChatGPT in my case. And
yeah,
like I know some people at work like using Claude, and everybody for whatever they're using may have found like a best tool. If you have like a company mandate, that is the tool. Like just think of all these people who are gonna try it, it's not gonna work, and they're like, okay, AI doesn't work for me. Gonna keep
AI
getting
doesn't work, period.
yeah. So that would be a much bigger downside in my mind than the cost
Yeah,
of not standardizing.
yeah. So thank you, Emil, for that. Satish, I had a question around kind of the blast radius, which
And
is
two, because
yeah.
of timing, we kind of have to start
Oh,
wrapping. But so why don't you go
oh,
quickly and then we'll go ahead and
38. I see 38 minutes on the clock. We have time.
you
Yeah,
have
I
time
know,
for
I know,
one
I
more.
know, I know.
There you go.
No, I do have a quick question on that because you called it radius of impact. I think I'm familiar with it as blast radius. So you talked about how affect customers and the downstream effect and so on and measurability. I am curious in terms of the different kind of impact measurability of a blast radius. If a component in your architecture, a system, whatever, is down, how do you figure out the impact of that particular component? Are there tools? What methods? What techniques do you use? When you're architecting, do you say, all right, as you're putting components together, okay, if this goes down, I mean, how do you wrap your head around that kind of impact?
Yeah, that's a very hard question to get right in production at scale. And that's because, you have to start thinking about it right from the moment you do the design of the system. When you're doing your architecture, you have to ask, okay, what are my hard dependencies and what are my soft dependencies? How can they go down? If I'm building a system that needs to be a 4 nines system,
Hmm.
I cannot obviously be dependent on a 3.5 nines system or a 3 nines system. And what makes it harder is that some of the off-the-shelf services, like for example, if you go to a managed service from a public cloud platform, what they advertise to you is not the achieved
Yeah,
availability. What they advertise to you is the availability after which they'll compensate you. That is not what you want as a
that's
builder.
right.
They are going to give me back some of my money, but my
But I
customers are
don't
already
care.
angry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's a very tricky problem, and you start by asking the dependency questions right at the design phase. And
Hmm.
then as you go through the life cycle of the software, you have to be very, very keen on making sure you have cellularity, which means that,
Mm.
let's say you are a geographically distributed service, your customers only rely on one or a pair of regions. Or let's say you have persistence, you have state, you have to make sure that the state is available across cells which have different failure modes. Perhaps they're isolated by way of regions or availability zones and so on and so forth. So cellularity becomes really, really important. And
Mm.
then when it comes to runtime, you have to measure your dependencies. Do not think that just because your customers did not experience a problem, you are good, because you might
Yeah.
just be lucky.
Yeah.
That blip that happened at midnight when customers were not really using your system at peak will come back and bite you in. So the whole life cycle changes when you want to design for blast radius, especially as you scale up across the geographies.
Excellent. No. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was thank you. Boris, floor is
Yeah,
yours.
no, that's great. Thank you guys very much. I'd say just to kind of start wrapping us up briefly, just for a minute, kind of three things that I heard today in ways, and three things that are near and dear to a lot of CTO and CIO engineering leaders that we're hearing about, and things that we are actively working very hard to also kind of address. Is one is visibility, like you mentioned. This visibility is critical, and it's funny. The blast radius is one great example that we don't spend as much time on. We're spending a lot of time with topics like divestitures, with topics like, what happens if this thing goes down because it's 30-year-old system. We don't know what things it's impacting because everything else is modernized, but this thing isn't. And we have no idea actually how much it wipes out when it goes down because we have, a lot of, kind of dependency on it. And so that's one. And we are looking to bring visibility by way of Cat.io so that you have all those dependency maps visible and readily available that are real time and current, available at all the time. Second thing that you guys mentioned, which is a topic near and dear to heart, is that, coding copilots are giving tools for developers. People have tools. And at the decision-making layer, at the tech intelligence layer, we're using their tools. And it makes sense because their tools are cool, but we're using them for different use cases, which beckons the question of where are our tools? And we definitely believe in the fact that there needs to be tooling in this area. And then I think the third area, as Emil mentioned, that the age of focusing on core competencies, and where that's especially more important, the areas that are not core competency would be helpful to have something that's informing them in a more,
Yeah.
prescriptive way. Anyway, just a quick heads up on Cat.io. Satish, Emil, Tufik. I mean, you guys have incredible backgrounds. I mean, big names: Dropbox, Salesforce, Splunk. Unicorn startups, Gem, Tufik, your career, Satish, all the things you've done in venture. Would love this input. And frankly, for the rest of the audience, Architecture Deconstructed, it's the beginning. Would love to have you on, share your inputs as well. We hope this input is very valuable for the rest of the community, and we hope we can build on this and certainly bring these topics that are really important for us to talk about to bear. Thank you
Yeah.
very much for joining
Thank you.
us today.
Thank you,
Thank
Emil
you.
and Satish. Really, really good to have you. Really, this is
Thank you,
really, I
Boris.
mean,
Thank you,
like,
Tofik.
I just realizing time went by. It's pretty cool. That's a good sign.
That was
That's a
It's a
good
good
nice
sign.
sign.
fun.
Thank you,
Good
guys.
night.
Have a
Bye.
good
Bye,
evening.
guys.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.